Hello, welcome everybody to Second Saturday. We're super excited to be here. This is our fifth Second Saturday, and it only keeps getting better and better. So, as Brittany said, my name is 𝗂𝗃. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a co-founder of Detroit Chempreneurist, as well as a chemist and entrepreneur. And I'm very excited to be here with y'all today. And so I'm going to send it back to Brittany to go ahead and share a little bit more about herself and our other board members.
Hello, my name is 𝗣eh𝗲𝗀𝘁𝘀𝘁. My pronouns are she, her, and I am also the co-founder and entrepreneurship instructor and the board president. I have an education background and a master's in social work and also an entrepreneur. Our fellow board members are Lynn Roosevelt-Wiggins. He is our director of outreach, so he connects us with different partnerships and also connects us with schools and organizations that we do our programming with. So if you know any schools or organizations that would be interested in our programming or even an event, please reach out to Lynn at DetroitChempreneurist.org and we'll coordinate that. And then we also have Katie Standiford, who is a fellow MSW, and she is our director of curriculum. So we are working to transform our curriculum into something that is a facilitated guide. So there's plenty of things in the works, and we're very excited to share that in the future with teachers for resources. So next we're gonna move and talk a little bit more about Detroit Chempreneurist and what we do. So our mission is to offer students from all backgrounds an opportunity to be empowered in an inclusive, safe space and excel in STEAM experiences. So STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, entrepreneurship, arts, and mathematics, while collaborating about personal care, chemistry, and entrepreneurship. And it's our vision to educate local youth in a holistic program that will help them prepare and explore their passions while also diversifying, increasing the fields of STEAM. And our goal is that we can create opportunities for rural and urban-owned small business owners to help boost the local economy. So now I'm going to pass it to Cass to talk a little bit more about what is personal care chemistry and entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Brittany. So what is personal care chemistry? I hear this question all the time. I don't know what that is. What does it mean? Well, yes, you do. We're talking about cosmetic products that you use every day to keep yourself safe and healthy and clean. So students will have the opportunity to learn how to formulate, manufacture, conceptualize their own products. They're going to explore these product ideas while they're using the scientific method that they're learning in school. So they're going to hypothesize what products are they going to create. They're going to experiment mixing different ingredients together, making observations. Do this ingredient combination work? Does it not work? Does it separate? And then they're going to draw conclusions from those experiments that they're doing. And then based on those outcomes, we're going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to go ahead and, remake our product, try something different. We go through lots of different chemical background on these types of products. So we learn what a mixture is, what is pH, what are solutions. We talk about the three main parts of components. So we have a very diverse curriculum as it relates to personal care chemistry. So they're not just learning about how to make products, but they're learning about those scientific properties behind those products. So now I'm going to pass it back over to Brittany to share a little bit more about the entrepreneurship side of the curriculum.
So the entrepreneurship side of the curriculum takes what students are learning with CAS and personal care chemistry and applies it to the field of entrepreneurship. But it goes even beyond that. So students can either take a product that they conceptualized in CAS's class or come up with their own unique idea, product or service that they'd like to share with the world. So our idea is to create fellow innovative change makers and status quo shakers in order to get the students thinking creatively about their communities or about products and seeing problems that might exist within their communities and how would they solve them. So we take them through developing their own toolkit in entrepreneurship. So they take their idea and then we work with them to create tools like creating their own market research surveys, creating prototypes of their products, ideas, generating a business model around those ideas, and practice pitching their ideas to ventures, about their ventures to stakeholders and investors. So next, we're going to share a little bit about what's going on with Detroit Chempreneurs currently. So we have some upcoming events. Currently, we have an ongoing fundraiser. It ends August 7th. This is a cell phone fundraiser, and the cell phone must have a battery. So if you have any old cell phones lying around or know somebody that does, that would be willing to donate them for this fundraiser, you can email info@detroitchempreneurs.org or text cell phone to 313-536-0714 to schedule a collection, drop off, or pickup. And we currently have a drop-off site that is Walking Lightly, and that is at 1031 Hilton in Ferndale. Other things we have going on next month, our second Saturday session, the July second Saturday session. The topic is around financial resources for entrepreneurs. So if you know any startup entrepreneurs or even entrepreneurs that have been in the business for a minute, we are offering a space to talk about more financial resources and opportunities that they can explore to get their products or services out there. And next, we have an exciting programming coming at Melvindale Middle School. So every Monday from July 11th to August 8th, we'll be at Melvindale Middle School for their summer camp. And then we also are working with the Michigan Science Center. So we have 2 different days that we'll be there talking about the different parts of our curriculum. So on August 2nd, we're going to be doing 𝗣𝗲𝗲𝗀𝘀𝘁𝘀 science. So we'll be working with K through 2, 3 through 5, and middle school groups doing experiments. So if you know any kids in those age ranges that would be interested, we have this event on our website. So we're going to post more information on how they can sign up. And then next, at August 13th is our August second Saturday session. And we're going to be talking about STEAM in the medical field specifically. And then lastly, on August 16th, we have our other workshop with Michigan Science Center, and that's Master Builders. So this is all around entrepreneurship. So same thing, we'll be working with K2, 3, 5, and middle school groups working on prototypes. And so if you know any students that would be interested in joining that summer camp, we'll have that information on our website so that way they can reserve and register for it. So next, I'm going to pass it back to Cass to talk about today's topic and conversation.
I don't know about y'all, but I'm super excited for those upcoming events. So for this month's second Saturday, we are spotlighting LGBTQ+ individuals in STEAM. Here at Detroit Chempreneurs, we know that all sexual orientation and gender identities are important. For Pride Month, we felt it was important to talk and learn not only about the individuals, but also how biases exist towards members of the LGBTQ+ community and how we can work to eliminate those biases. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker, 𝗔𝗯𝗂𝘁𝘁𝘁, Arts Learning Coordinator, Ohio Arts Council. 𝗔𝗯𝗂𝘁𝘁 is an Arts Learning Coordinator at the Ohio Arts Council, OAC, a state agency that funds and supports quality arts experiments to strengthen Ohio communities culturally, educationally, and economically. In his role, Jared oversees an annual grants portfolio of programs that include those that support artist residencies, student visits to art experiences, partnerships between organizations and schools conducting projects with arts, learning at their core, and other special initiatives and activities for learners of all ages and abilities. Jared also leads the agency efforts on its Fund Every County initiative, ensuring state dollars are impacting every county and every legislative district in Ohio. Jared earned a master's degree in arts policy and administration from The Ohio State University and his Bachelor of Music and Instrumental Music Education from Western Michigan University. Raised in the Detroit area, he began his career teaching band, choir, orchestra, and guitar in the public schools of Southwest Michigan. Jared, thank you so much for being here today, and we look forward to hearing you speak.
Thank you, Cass. Thank you, Brittany. Hello, everybody. As Cass said, my name is 𝗔𝗯𝘂𝘁𝘂𝘁. I'm an arts learning coordinator at the Ohio Arts Council. My pronouns are he, him, and thanks again for asking and having me. And hey, happy Pride to everyone that's celebrating this month. Really grateful to spend some time with you today. Before I jump into a little bit of my own narrative and some storytelling, I want to provide just a brief land acknowledgement and to mention that I am currently occupying the ancestral and contemporary territory of the 𝗔𝗯ance, Potawatomi, Delaware, Miami, Peoria, Seneca, Wyandot, Ojibwa, and Cherokee peoples. Specifically, the land I'm on was ceded in 1795 by the Treaty of Greenville and forced the removal of tribes through the Indian Removal Act of 1830. I want to honor the resiliency of these tribal nations and recognize the historical context that have and continue to affect Indigenous peoples of this land. Thank you. So to begin, as Cass mentioned, a lot of my own background surrounds the arts and cultural sectors. In fact, all of it from a very young age. My narrative has been focused on the arts role in my life and everyone else's. So just a quick thought exercise. You're welcome to utilize the chat if you're here in the space today, or just think or write yourself. But what I want to pose to the group and to you listening, think about what the arts are. What do they mean to you? Are there any examples that are conjured in your brain when you think about the word arts, which is that A in STEAM? Go ahead and spend just a couple seconds. Feel free to utilize the chat or think about it just in your own mind. What are the arts? Provide some examples, think about it, and there are no wrong answers. So let's just take a minute and feel free to utilize the chat or any other way of thinking here. Thanks for that. So like I said, no wrong answers, but I'm seeing some great responses in the chat, a lot about expression of creativity, self-expression, the impact message for others, expression of the world around us, all really wonderful things. Music, dance, painting, photography, singing, everything that represents creativity and culture. Yes. And so it's that and so much more. I myself, I'm a musician predominantly. I was raised from a very young age to appreciate music. And I think a little bit of musician blood runs through me from a couple of families, and my grandfather and great-grandfather were all artists themselves. So just, wanted to spend a moment just defining the arts, because it's in the title of my own title, it's in the title of my employer. And so it really does mean expression of the world around us. So continue to hold that close as we talk a bit today about my own background. But just so you're aware, the arts have been central to my life since a very young age. I decided very early on that I wanted my life to include as much of the arts as possible, hence having decided to spend my whole career living and supporting arts and culture. And while I call myself an arts administrator by day and a musician by night, both are central to my own identity. If you take a step back and think about the arts in the context of today's focus, which is LGBTQ plus individuals, you might think, and you might be right, that the arts have always been a haven for LGBTQ plus folks. In fact, you might be able to argue that a core component of the arts and cultural and entertainment sectors are the contributions of LGBTQ plus people. In my opinion, that might be generalizing a huge segment of the US economy and a sector that by and large seems welcoming and opening to people of all backgrounds, but absolutely has a history of discrimination, whitewashing, homo and transphobia, depending on where and when you look. So the arts as a sector is huge. It's one of the top, and when you think about arts in terms of arts and cultural and entertainment, one of the largest sectors of the US economy, but it's very diversified. And let's spend just a moment talking about entrepreneurialism in the arts, the STEAM, STEAM. The arts and cultural sector and entrepreneurialism go hand in hand. Since probably around the time the word entrepreneur came into sort of the modern vernacular. and as seen as a legitimate career path. So entrepreneurs are folks who flex their creative muscles that are oftentimes honed by making and creating art. So arts, entrepreneurialism, science, technology, math, none of those things can exist without creative thinking. So I am so excited to have been invited to this conversation, because the arts are paramount to every career out there, and especially in the folks that we are hearing here today, and that we're going to hear from in a little bit. So again, thank you for being here and having the arts at the table. A little bit about my own current role at the Ohio Arts Council. You can see my biography on the screen, but in essence, in a very tight nutshell, I work with a government agency of the state of Ohio to support arts and culture around the state in all 88 counties, primarily through grant making and resource sharing. So in my day-to-day, predominantly, I utilize my arts administrative skills and grant making skills to ensure that state tax dollars go out the door in the form of grants to support culture around the state. No matter where you're at, where you're listening to today, odds are pretty good is that you've got a sister agency in your state that does the same sort of thing that the Ohio Arts Council does. In Michigan, for instance, the Michigan Council on the Arts is that state agency. So just know that even though I'm calling in from Ohio today, there's organizations around the nation that do a lot of these same sort of things, marrying arts and policy and arts administration. So that's my current role. Let me spend just a little bit of time about how I got here. So picture this, college. Me entering college being a very closeted 18-year-old. However, entering college, meeting folks like me for the first time. When I say like me, I mean people who are part of the LGBTQ+ community. So I struggled to come to grips with my sexuality. It was a constant push and pull of trying to be a, quote, normal college guy versus the reality that I wanted and needed to live, which is living as a gay man. So sophomore year of college, I came out to my friends and family. Junior and senior years were spent living my truth and sort of having the prototypical college experience, primarily as an out college student. So I got to start living my truth around sophomore year, but the challenges didn't stop there. I wanted to be a music educator. So I went to school studying instrumental music education. I got certified to teach music education in Michigan, and I formally became a music educator after I was certified. I wanted to be a band director in the public schools. I wanted to have music change lives of students. I wanted to do that from a very young age, not just in college, but I truly thought that music is a way to bring communities together, to allow students to express themselves and their creativity, and hopefully integrate music into other subject areas as well to hopefully help folks understand that music can touch all of our lives and can lead kids onto a successful path and a successful career. But there were challenges and struggles, like I said. When I was student teaching, for instance, I couldn't live my authentic self. For instance, when I was student teaching in Southwest Michigan, I was about 21 years old at the time. I actually came across a student at a gay bar, it was an 18 and up gay bar in the Southwest Michigan area. And I knew them as a 21-year-old gay man who was obviously sort of out and proud at that time. It was very, frankly, nerve-wracking and anxious because I had not been out to the students that I taught, to their parents, to the education community. It was scary because being gay, I sort of had to check that at the door as I walked in, because my goal when I was teaching was to focus on the music and what music can do, not necessarily my own personal narrative. So it was difficult to imagine a future that didn't let me be me. And by that, I mean being out and proud gay man while teaching in a classroom. And that's just one story. My story is not unique nor special. I've known, met, and grown close to many educators who continue to experience these difficulties in their day-to-day professional careers. Education is not for the faint at heart. The education path is not for the faint at heart. But I think what's really exciting is that there is now this wider national conversation around LGBTQ+ issues in education. We're seeing these bills being pushed through state legislators at the state level, those, quote, don't say gay bills, that are trying to silence curriculum components that are paramount to letting LGBTQ plus educators be themselves. And so what I want to be clear, what I'm not saying is I'm not advocating for those in the LGBTQ plus community to forego pursuing their dreams and passions of education due to these obstacles that I've experienced. But on the contrary, we need more people in our community, in the LGBTQ plus community, to speak and live their truths and share their narratives. We want children to witness and be part of the lives of LGBTQ plus teachers. So join me in continuing to advocate for those kinds of professions. We've got a long way to go. So I'll take a pause there and just say, next steps in my own career, picture this: graduate school and post-college. So I decided to go down a different path following some of those challenges in the classroom of being my authentic self. I moved on to obtaining a master's degree in arts policy administration. And I spent, after graduate school, I spent a few years as a consultant in New York City and Washington, D.C., predominantly consulting with arts organizations. Arts administration was a new field to me at the time when I heard about it. When I went to go pursue my master's degree, it was kind of a love at first sight, so to speak. I got a chance to sort of hone my skills and background as an educator, while also learning about management skills, business skills, and of course, taking the arts to heart, which is what I knew I always wanted to do. So in my consulting career on the East Coast, I spent a lot of time doing strategic planning for arts organizations, doing development and fundraising, event planning, capital campaigns, all of that I got a chance to consult on for organizations around the country and world. And the time spent in those roles were extremely gratifying. I got to meet many diverse and successful people, and I was surrounded by supportive and open individuals. I knew that living in New York, living in DC, meeting folks in the arts and cultural sector, I knew this was my place in space. And for instance, my boss in New York was a strong-willed and very fierce lesbian woman. And her partner was the same. And she was the sort of second in command at our consulting firm. In fact, a quick story, the day that gay marriage was legalized in the United States, I was living in New York at the time, and I walked into my consulting firm that day. It was June 26th, 2015. Gay marriage was just legalized, and there was a huge celebration, a big party. I got to give my coworkers a big hug, arriving to the office that day, and of course, tears were flowing. The same probably couldn't have been said in my previous role as an educator, but that's just speculation. But point being, I was happy, and I knew that I could be out and proud as an arts consultant. In DC, I had a similar experience. I had many coworkers who were out and gay and part of the LGBTQ plus community, and it was wonderful. I moved home, home being back to the Midwest after my time on the East Coast, into my current role at the Ohio Arts Council, where I work as an arts administrator for the past 5 years now, under the umbrella of state government. And in my role, I support arts and culture in the state. And it's a state that you might be aware of is sort of becoming more and more conservative. And you might think, how do you work with that? How do you work in a sector that the arts that are sort of seen as liberal or progressive in a state that is sort of trying to pass laws and bills that are part of the cultural wars? It's not easy living and trying to be myself outside of the 9 to 5 while working in a system that, frankly, is pushing back against some of my own morals and beliefs. It's not easy, and it sort of has led me to need to compartmentalize these issues and challenges. But I stay true to the fact that arts and culture is a way for folks to be creative, to tap into their own creativity, to lean into their own creative selves, to do what they want in this world. So I firmly believe that I have a role to play in that. I support artists and arts organizations and arts educators to be able to do that in the state, in Ohio. And something I wish I had known that I didn't know back then through my own career journey that I know now, is that everyone is on their own journey to self-discovery. Everyone has their own narratives, not to compare yourself to others in their own lives. You heard my story today, and I would bet that everyone here today has their own stories of discovery and unique storytelling experiences. What I want to say to folks listening is that your story is unique and special, and that you're running on the right track, whether it involves the arts or entrepreneurialism or something else, mathematics, science, engineering, you're going to be on the right track. There is no normal way of progressing in a career and no normal way of coming out. So I really encourage everyone to run at your own pace, and you will cross that much anticipated finish line when you're ready. And I want to dispel maybe one final myth of the arts and cultural sector sort of writ large. I can't get off my soapbox here without saying something like this. You know, when the arts are part of the STEM or the STEAM conversation, folks might look at the arts and say, well, there's a proposition or a mutually exclusive pathway. If you want to follow the arts, you're going to be a starving artist or a starving arts administrator or a starving arts educator. The money itself really might be in I don't know, science or technology or engineering. Follow the money or follow the passion. That's the decision that artists are forced to make. What I want to say is that you can do both. You can follow the money. You can follow the passion. You can research careers, find what interests you. If you really like movies, for instance, look at the credits at the end of movies. Look at all of those jobs and responsibilities that fly past the screen. Hundreds and hundreds of jobs exist in the entertainment and arts and cultural sectors that you might not even be aware of that integrate things like the arts into technology, for instance. If you love Broadway musicals, look at the playbill if you're going to see a production down at the Opera House or at a music hall. Look at all the folks that it takes to make that production happen. Research those careers, fine-tune your interests accordingly, and I have no doubt you'll land in a profession that really meets your hopes and dreams. So with that, I'll stop here and say thanks again for having me, Detroit Chemtrepreneurs. It's an absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward to sticking around and hearing from other folks today. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jared, for sharing your story. It was very impactful, and I was inspired by you, and I really think it's so important that you highlighted sharing your authentic self. And I mean, that might not come right away, but it's important to feel safe and being able to express yourself. And I feel like that's so detrimental. And even how you highlighted on that last part about, a lot of people, especially in the arts community, are stuck between the money and the passion, and just how you really highlighted that, because that's in Detroit Chempreneurs, we, want students to explore that passion. And there's also opportunities to make money too, to live, a well-rounded life. So we appreciate you sharing your story and your insights, and thank you. I can't wait to hear more in the Q&A.
My pleasure. Thanks, Brittany.
So next, we're gonna introduce our next presenter. Our next presenter is 𝗣𝗲𝗲, Health Equity Consultant for the Michigan Public Health Institute. 𝗣𝗲𝗲, is a white queer human working as a health equity consultant in the Center for Health Equity Practice at the Michigan Public Health Institute. Primarily, they co-facilitate dialogue and learning about dismantling racism and other forms of oppression and striving towards health equity. They are committed to justice and liberation for all, with a specific focus on understanding whiteness and the LGBTQ+ experiences. Prior to their current role, Vanessa's work was in the maternal child health space, focusing on improving child mortality rates. Vanessa earned their BA in sociology and psychology, as well as an MPH from Michigan State University. In their free time, you can usually find them reading a book or three, spending lots of time thinking about and eating food, I'm with that too, dancing around the house with their spouse and snuggling with their dogs, Riley, Danny, and Rose. Thank you so much for being our presenter today, Vanessa, and I'm gonna pass it to you now.
Thanks, Brittany. I am excited to be here. My name is 𝗣𝗲𝗲. My pronouns are she and they. And as Brittany said, I'm a health equity consultant working for the Michigan Public Health Institute in our Center for Health Equity Practice. And so
My specific focus in my role is to train and educate public health professionals and other healthcare providers on how racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and other forms of oppression impact health outcomes. We know that those are uniquely tied together, and they impact the choices that people have available to them, and how that relates to health. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done to dismantle those systems of oppression, specifically within our own self. As Cass brought in earlier, we know that bias exists, and bias exists in our healthcare, in our public health systems, and across a lot of different fields. And so really taking a step in doing a lot of introspection, reflection, understanding what's going on in our brains and how we view the world is incredibly important in to tear down that bias and work to health equity, so everyone has the opportunity to achieve their optimal health and well-being, whatever that looks like. And so I do a lot of work with people to have dialogues, get used to talking about these situations, the environment that we live in, the context that we're in, and get more comfortable with that. We know that people aren't used to talking about race, talking about sexual orientation, gender identity. And so a lot of that is practicing. How do we talk about those things in a way that honors lived experiences, honors our historical context, and builds relationship? I really center my work in we have to build relationship. That's incredibly important, both with ourselves, as Jared said, it's that self-discovery piece, and with each other, because we're all connected, and that's really important, especially when we're thinking about health. And so alongside my work as a health equity consultant, I'm also part of a group called Queering Medicine, and we are focused in the Lansing area to improve the health outcomes of LGBTQ plus individuals in the area. And so we're a grassroots advocacy organization. We try to we disseminate information. We collect new information. We've done some surveys, some focus groups with LGBTQ plus individuals and their health in the area. We have a whole directory of providers that are LGBTQ plus friendly, safe, and inclusive. And it's primarily Lansing focused, but we do have some other providers around the state of Michigan so that people can go there and find suggestions of people who they could get their healthcare from that feels good. They feel welcomed and validated. We also have a whole intake form guidance for healthcare providers. So our team at Queering Medicine spent a lot of time and a lot of energy producing this 25-page document that really walks through how can we be inclusive towards folks, from asking pronouns, making sure that we're using the name that people want to be used, even if it doesn't align with necessarily their legal name. How do we navigate that situation? How do we collect information about sexual orientation and gender identity so that people's healthcare is responsive to their situation? And so both of my roles, I see those both hand in hand. They go together. I spend a lot of my time thinking very deeply about health and how do our identities show up in that. I'm a queer human myself, and I have experienced some challenges in the workplace and just out in society. I often get labeled as a straight person because of the way I look. I'm very femme presenting, and so people make assumptions about me when I'm referring to my spouse, and they just assume I'm talking about a man. And so it's these small little interactions that just sort of pick at you. It's that normalness, that it's straight is what's normal. That's the dominant narrative we hear. And so I try to work to dismantle that, especially in the health sector, but even out in society, because I want everyone to feel welcome, feel inclusive, feel like they can be their true self, as Jared said, living their authentic self and feeling safe to do that. And it's not always the case. I've really started recently doing some work internally at Michigan Public Health Institute to make our institute more welcoming. So we are currently running a survey across we have like 800 employees that we have sent this survey out to see what are the experiences of our LGBTQ plus staff members, and maybe how can we work to make the space more welcoming, they feel safer, because there's been people who I work with who don't feel comfortable to come out, who aren't safe in their places to do that, and then end up leaving the institute. And so we lose valuable talent because our culture isn't what it needs to be to support them. So we're working on that. I'm part of a work group to look at our policies. How are our policies discriminating against certain people? How can we institute some more training? I run our institute-wide health equity and social justice training. And while we lead with racism explicitly, it's not exclusively, but there's always room for us to grow and dive deeper in what we're talking about and how we have these dialogues. And so we're working towards that. And sometimes it feels like it's going really slowly. I'm like, come on, we can do this quicker. We can do this quicker. And so I'm hoping we'll get there as an institute really soon. But we have to do it. We can't stay stagnant anymore because people's lives are being harmed. People's health are being harmed. We know that in the healthcare field, people of LGBTQ plus communities face biases. And then that means that people aren't going to get healthcare and get the help that they need to improve their outcomes. And so we know that especially transgender folks, gender nonconforming individuals, receive a lot of bias. They receive a lot of discrimination, stigma. Providers don't know how to navigate spaces like that. We don't always honor humanity in someone's experiences. And so that prevents people from getting their health care. And that's important. While our health is determined outside of the doctor's office, we spend very little time in the doctor's office. Those interactions are important, and people can have huge health crisis, and not get the help they needed because of how they were treated in previous experiences. So focusing on eliminating these biases, eliminating the broader structures of oppression that we see saves lives. It saves lives. We see a lot of anti-trans bills popping up in a lot of different states, trying to block trans children from playing in sports, being themselves. That is incredibly harmful. That is harming a variety of people. It harms all of us because we're denying the humanity that we see in each other. We're denying people their lived experiences and to be safe. And so it's been tough. We often think because it's Pride Month right now, we see a lot of Pride as a celebration. It's a big party. We see rainbows. It's about excitement. It is all of that. It is all of that. And it's still a struggle to be seen as full individuals with all of the rights that everyone else has, that safety. There are still places where we're allowed to be discriminated against in laws. We're not protected under all the laws, the civil rights laws. And so Pride is still that struggle towards acceptance, welcoming, and freedom. And so we can't ignore that. It is still that historical part. We tend to think, oh yeah, well, it's a lot more mainstream now. It's fine. There's no struggles. And that's not true because we're seeing a lot of those things still happen. And so Pride to me is that celebration. It's that joy that comes being surrounded by my community members, seeing all the different types of individuals living their best life, partying, it's so much joy. And it's a reminder that we still have to fight every day to break down those barriers that we face. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's just an acceptance of where we are. I firmly believe that if we don't acknowledge our history and our current reality, then we're not going to move forward because we're just denying what's actually going on. And so in public health, our root is social justice. It's making sure that our populations are healthy and have what they need to live their best life, whatever that looks like. Is it access to affordable food? Is it having transportation to get to your job or to the doctor or to the grocery store? Is it having a thriving wage? we often hear living wage, but I want thriving wages for people so that they can do whatever they want to do that makes them happy. Maybe that is engaging in the arts and going to Broadway shows. Maybe that is doing a startup for technology, being an entrepreneur, whatever that looks like, a thriving wage so people can take care of their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual self. And so all of these things play into our health, and we often forget about them. We often forget that all of this plays into different aspects of our well-being, and they're all important. And so how do we as public health work to break down some of those barriers? I've worked on some projects in my time that focus on changing dominant narrative. So changing how we talk about certain things. In this case, it was substance use disorders. So flipping the book and saying, people with substance use disorders can still be good parents. They're still need to be respected, changing the narrative that local public health departments put out about that. I have right now I'm working on a really big project that involves 10 different states across the country. There's a lot of money coming in from COVID, from the government, from the federal government. And so how do we spend that money in an equitable way? How do we use that to dismantle and remove those barriers of health inequities that we see? The COVID pandemic highlighted and really shined a light on all of the health inequities that were there, but they became more apparent in the pandemic. So how can we spend this money, this big money, public health? This is a lot of money flooding into public health. How do we do that in a way that keeps our communities whole and helps them achieve what they need to achieve? I work with some of our local health systems. In the Detroit area, I work with McLaren. We're doing some LGBTQ plus training for their staff members. So really, what is LGBTQ plus? What does that mean? What are the different identities in that space? As Jared said, getting those stories out there. And then how do we collect sexual orientation and gender identity data so that we can see what's happening? What are those inequities in the different populations, even within the LGBTQ plus communities, and how do we better serve people for that? So I'm working with them. They're going to train a bunch of their staff members. Another health system in the state, we've built some online modules for. So we're doing a lot of good work out here, and we need more people. I'll make this plug. We need more people in public health. Public health is everything. It's everything. I oftentimes have been asked, like, Vanessa, what is public health? And it's very hard for me to come up with an answer because public health touches all sorts of things. It's that, if you go to a restaurant and the health department is making sure your restaurant's safe, it is gun safety laws. Gun violence is a public health crisis. So it's working to protect people from gun violence. It's immunizations. It's those vaccines that we see. I think COVID really highlighted the importance of vaccinations. That's public health right there. It's making sure that our sexually transmitted diseases are limited. So we provide education, we provide access to contraceptives. Public health is so much that you really can find whatever you need in that space. There's so many different ways to engage in public health and work in public health that I love to plug it because we need public health professionals. Public health is really understaffed, especially now because of the pandemic. There's been a lot of burnout in public health professionals. And we see those systems changing. I see different groups trying to work to make their workplaces better, to keep people whole and engaged in the work because public health is so important. I love that COVID has put public health in the forefront. I don't love COVID. I wish that wasn't a thing, but I do love that the field is out there. We know what public health is a little bit more, and hopefully getting people more engaged. We see the importance of working together to end some of these big health crises that we have right now. And so really my work is a part of me. It's a part of my identity. I really ground myself in social justice and working towards liberation for all, because I believe that we're all connected and these things harm all of us. And so we've seen the struggle for freedom and liberation since the beginning of this country. And we're still working there. And sometimes it seems really tough and overwhelming, but I like to remind myself that who does it benefit if I stop? If I don't engage in this work, if I'm not living who I am, if I'm not living up to my values and working to dismantle systems of oppression, dismantle racism and homophobia and transphobia, who's benefiting from that? Certainly not the people who have those identities and lived experiences. And so that's really what keeps me going. It's that hope that even those small steps are still steps, they're still wins. We have to celebrate them and we have to keep moving forward, because if we stop, if people just stop throughout history to fight for their liberation and fight for justice, we wouldn't be where we are. And so it's acknowledging where we've been and how far we've come, and keep going forward and moving forward. Thanks, Brittany.
Thanks, Vanessa. Very powerful work. Every time I hear you speak about your work, I'm just enlightened. And you know, like you said, we need people like you, and small steps are some steps. And a lot of times, you know, it seems overwhelming to take on such a big feat, but, you know, you can do it and you can help dismantle this oppression, you know, that so many different people are impacted by. And especially how you highlighted, you know, yes, Pride is a celebration, but there's so much work that still needs to be done. It's, you know, recognizing the history, but also the road forward and how we can resolve that. So thank you for sharing your work. I hope that our listeners get inspired and go into public health, because we definitely need more people like you out in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, so next I'm going to pass it back to Cass to introduce our last presenter today.
All right, thank you so much, Brittany. So our next presenter is Nicholas White, Senior Associate Engineer at AcuTech Group, Inc. Mr. Nicholas A. White, a Senior Associate Engineer at AcuTech Group, Inc., has over 8 years of hands-on experience working in midstream and downstream engineering and operations. Mr. White managed products throughout the eastern United States and above-ground storage tanks, turnarounds, balancing projects needs with business and supply considerations. He is skilled in developing company standards for process safety and operations. While working in a midstream industry, he developed, implemented MOC PSSR standards and digital workflows and co-authorized LOPA community standards. He has experience in the development and implementation of comprehensive mechanical integrity programs, including predictive, preventive, and corrective maintenance efforts. He has led PSM compliance audits and served as the site lead for comprehensive mechanical integrity. He is well versed with the hazards associated with midstream and downstream operations. He now serves as a facilitator and consultant for process safety and risk reduction in the wider chemical and manufacturing industries. Thank you so much today for being here, Nick. We look forward to hearing more.
Thanks, Cass. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me today. I'm thrilled. Vanessa, Jared, you all are tough to follow up on, but I'm going to try. So as Cass mentioned in my background, I'm an engineer that works with AcuTech Group. We're a consulting firm that specializes in process safety. So one of the acronyms in my bio that comes off my work CV that's up on the screen there is PSM. And that's a critical one. It stands for Process Safety Management. And it is an OSHA regulation that has really been adopted worldwide as the best practice way to manage risk in your operations that involve highly hazardous chemicals. So when we've got listed on the screen midstream and downstream operations, I started my career working in as an engineer in the oil and gas industry, and have more recently transitioned to the consulting side, where I'm working with a really broad range, chemical manufacturing, still some oil and gas. We do some work with liquefied natural gas as well, which is something that is really popular and crucial in Europe, but just becoming really commercialized in the United States. So my background is obviously in engineering. I'm a civil engineer, which doesn't fit in with any of the stuff that I just talked about. I went to school with this idea that I was going to design bridges. And, I'll give my piece of advice, something I wish I'd known. And I kind of did by accident. I was at a career fair and had these construction and engineering infrastructure type companies on my list to go and see. And first off, anytime you get a chance to be at a career fair or an event like that that's connecting people to different companies, I would encourage you to take a leap and go do it, even if you're not dressed up in the fancy suit or you haven't had a ton of time to prepare. Even if you're just in there and you get yourself into the atmosphere of making those connections, they're so critical. And I walked up and was getting ready to stand in line at a big long line for a construction company that did right what I thought I wanted to do, build bridges. And I looked over and there was a national oil and gas company that had nobody in line. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to spend my time one place or the other, I guess I should probably walk over here and see what they have to say. And that turned into, 7+ years of a really fruitful career and a ton of phenomenal work relationships throughout the United States. I've been based in the Midwest, in Ohio, and then in West Virginia for quite a while in most of my career, but I've done project work across the country. So my big piece of advice is, when you see opportunities like that, sometimes you just have to take them. I never thought that I would do what I do now. I work with all kinds of different fluids that flow through pipes, chemicals, asphalt, oil, gas, and they all flow through pipes just like water does. I make that joke when people ask me how I ended up there. Everything flows, but it's a little bit of a leap, and it's been so rewarding. So sometimes when those opportunities come, you've just got to jump and take them. I started out in a project manager type role, scheduling projects. When we say turnarounds, it's where we're taking something out of service and we're making repairs. We're trying to make sure that it is up and ready to go, and we're not going to need to get in there and have that thing offline again for some period of time. For an above ground storage tank, we want to go 20 years between emptying those things out, because it's extremely expensive to empty those things out. And there's emissions that occur if you have to empty those things out. So you want to minimize that to the absolute possible, while still making sure you can maintain the integrity of that asset. So our goal was that, hey, we don't want to have shutdown emissions, but once every 20 years on each of these vessels. So that meant the work that we did during the turnaround was really critical to understand what was happening inside of there. What's the condition of everything? Is there anything that, hey, we know something technologically now that we didn't know 20 years ago that, hey, we need to make a change. And we couldn't necessarily find out what was inside of that thing until we had already shut it down and had it clean and could walk in for the first time without a bunch of gasoline or diesel or asphalt vapors. So super fun experience. After I did that for a couple years, I had an opportunity to take a temporary assignment with my company. And that's another thing I would encourage anybody that is working across the STEAM fields to do. Again, sometimes when you get chances, you've got to be ready to take it. And it upended my life, my personal life a little bit by going and doing it. But I'm so glad I did, because it led me into the natural gas industry, which is where I spent the bulk of my career time, and so rewarding. I was a startup and commissioning engineer on 2 major expansion projects that totaled about $300 million. It was where I first got exposed to process safety and kind of quantitative and qualitative risk reduction, which is really what I focus on now in my career. That was a part of what I did in that first job, but I got to be, the local engineer that was the jack of all trades. I was folks' resource for anything technical, even if I had no idea what it would be. I'm about as far from an electrical engineer as an engineer can be. And I was the main resource for how to do that. So it required a lot of leaning on my network, people that I'd met in college throughout my career for those sorts of advice, and a lot of continuing education and training. I've done quite a bit of it from an electrical engineering perspective that I never thought I would do or even be interested in. But sometimes those career paths aren't a straight line, much like our journeys in our personal lives are not always a straight line, or they're not a line that follows a diagonal path the whole way, right? Our journeys professionally and personally are ones that sometimes there's a rock in the middle, or sometimes we got to take a fork in the road, and you're not sure which pass is the right one to take. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking either of those passes, and that's the fun part of what I've seen in my career is that I've had a couple of those decisions, and in most cases I've taken the riskier pass, and ultimately with hard work and a little bit of elbow grease, it has always worked out well for me. But one of the things that I think is unique about my experience, I was not really out in high school. I came out my sophomore year of college, much like Jared mentioned earlier, and got to live most of my college career that way. I too felt like I had to go back in the closet a little bit and coming into the professional world. And that was a decade ago, or a half a decade ago, almost a decade ago, but still, I don't know if I really needed to or not, but I certainly made this impression for myself that I did. And the place that I came back out at work was at a processing plant in the middle of nowhere in West Virginia, a place that I would not have thought was the right place to do that. And it could not have been more welcoming. Never once did I have a conversation or a negative connotation to me being able to be who I was. And it was a normal, it became a normal course of business when I would talk about my significant other as, folks around at the coffee pot or the water cooler were talking about their wife or their husband. I could freely talk about my partner. It was so almost mind-boggling, even looking back, that was the place that had that openness and acceptance. And it's because, I truly think it's because ultimately those folks valued more than anything two things. Somebody that was willing to listen and not judge. No question is a bad question, right? The only bad questions are the ones you're afraid to ask, especially if you're in a situation where you don't have all the information and you could make a better decision if you got some more information, right? If you don't go get that's the only kind of bad question. And those folks really valued somebody who was authentic. And yeah, I think that's an incredibly valuable lesson for all of us, is that sometimes that path to get to our authenticity, Jared and Vanessa both touched on it, sometimes that path is difficult. And ultimately the rewards on the other side are that you have deeper and more meaningful relationships because people see you as your authentic self. So I did, I'm still a little mind-boggled by the fact that was the place that I was able to come out. I moved from there and I moved into a management role. I was supervising a team of blue-collar mechanics and electricians in Eastern Ohio at two natural gas facilities. And that presented a new challenge to me. I'd never been a gay man supervising others. And likewise, some of my employees had never met the gay person, let alone their new boss is both an engineer and a gay man. I will never forget. It didn't compute for me at the time, but one of my mechanics walked into my office and started spewing off about how he respected people of all genders and all orientations, and that didn't matter to him. And I just kind of, I waved it off at the time. It's like, what is he talking about? How did that come out? And I learned a couple months later that somebody had filled him in on my behalf. And that's what led to that conversation. But that was such an interesting growth for us. From me, I wouldn't say I didn't go back in the closet by any means. I also was careful to, for the first couple months, keep the focus on my work self as opposed to my personal self. Never once did I use a different pronoun or leave out a he in a sentence, but I was careful to try to put the focus on my work ethic and coming in to, again, be my authentic self. And the most important part of my authentic self was that I wanted to work hard to do well by them. That when you're supervising and leading folks, it's important to remember that you're working for them, and you can't be effective if they are not effective. And ultimately, we got there as a team. It took us more than a year probably to get comfortable in that situation where I don't think they had qualms about working for a gay man. And then I was kind of through my uncertainty about how that was going to go. And that was something I didn't necessarily expect to encounter. And that's another piece. You're not only going to come out once in your life in the LGBTQ plus space. It's going to happen over and over again. It doesn't necessarily get easier as you go. The piece that does get easier is your confidence in yourself and in that being authentically you. So my experience in the STEAM world, a lot of it is shaped by my personal identity as a gay man. Some of it is easier for me because I'm able to present fairly well in that world. On the outside, I look like a straight white man. And that's a benefit that I have that others do not. But the piece that I can share is the most important thing that you can bring to any table, especially in a table where you're working with people from diverse backgrounds. I was managing a team of blue collar folks who had not gone to college, and I'm working in a leadership team with others that have degrees in safety, in human resources, in graphic design, in entrepreneurship for one of our plant supervisors, folks with military backgrounds. It's bringing all of those ideas to the table and making sure that everybody feels comfortable sharing them. That's the most important part, because ultimately that's how you create a diverse workspace. It's not only how something looks visually or on paper, it's also about the diversity of the thought that people are comfortable sharing in that workspace. And that's why panels like this are awesome, because they help to encourage that diversity of thought from different groups and different backgrounds. And the beauty is it's recorded and it's out there for people to be able to see it and grow from it and benefit from it, for hopefully for years to come. Cass, Brittany, I think that is my story. I'll pass it back to one of you.
All right. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Nick. You've had a very exciting career and you gave some great advice to the students. Just try new things, go places, meet people, experience what's out there, and you never know where that will take you. And, you are absolutely an example of that. In spotlight some of the things that you said, it's so important to feel comfortable and that you're valued and that you can talk about those things at the coffee pot, right? Because your mental health and your physical health is impacted by that. If you have to compartmentalize, well, that was a big word for me, and not be your authentic self and, really focus on everyone else's comfortability. And it's almost like you feel like you have to work harder to prove yourself. And,
right.
And we want to work away from that. So we really appreciate you taking the time to share your story and to talk with us today. And it truly means a lot. And so now we're going to go ahead and open it up for some questions. I'm going to give a moment for anyone joining us today to come off mute, to drop it in the chat. If you have any questions for any of our presenters, we look forward to hearing those. And if we don't see any come through in the chat or no one feels comfortable enough to come off mute, I do have a few questions for everyone that I've prepared before the presentation. This is the awkward silence where maybe I play the Jeopardy music. Do, 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 do. All right, doesn't look like anyone's coming off mute, but we'll give a few more seconds to the chat. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll get started with my questions. But as I'm speaking, if you think of something, feel free, raise your hand, come off mute, interrupt me, say, Cass, it's my turn. And I will honor that because we're here for all of you today. So my first question is for everyone. You know, we've talked about our experiences, our journeys, ourself. And, you know, sometimes we have to not be our authentic self, you know, because we're afraid or maybe worried about what others think. And, you know, as I mentioned, that can be very mentally and physically taxing. And Vanessa touched on that as well. So I want to hear from everyone. How do you practice self-care? Because that is so important, right? You know, even in the outside of the LGBTQ plus community, it's important for other people who are in professional fields and maybe have a stressful environment. So we'll go ahead and go in the order of our presenters. So Jared, you'll start, Vanessa to follow, and Nick, you'll finish us out strong.
What a great question, and a great question for me to kick us off on. So I have so many thoughts regarding self-care. I think I talk about this topic the most with my colleagues. I mean, when you think about the arts sector and the folks that I work with and you know, my friends and family, look, the fact of the matter is that everyone's experiencing trauma these days, you know, kids, adults, young ones, old ones alike. What I have found to be deeply gratifying has been reflecting on my relationships, checking in on people, just a quick text message or a phone call has made me feel good about, you know, or I should say better about the state of our world, the state of my relationships. You know, we've been waylaid by this pandemic that's, you know, been going on for 2+ years, and it has really changed how we interact with each other and as a society. And we have to, in my opinion, work extra hard at sort of reconfiguring or building back those bonds that we've sort of relied on all these years before the pandemic. And so to me, I mean, self-care is all about relationships with myself, relationships with others. And so if I continue to sort of take that to heart, to build on that, I find that I myself am just a happier human, happier to be around. And, you know, some chocolate never hurts now and then, either in terms of some self-care and also taking it easy on yourself. You know, don't hold yourself up to always needing to be happy or always being on. It's okay to take a day off, to let yourself just breathe. We are in this late pandemic stage where I feel like everyone has this need to just put themselves out there again. And I don't think that's the case. Everyone's a little different. Again, everyone's on their own journey. Just to be patient with people. That's how I practice some self-care.
All right, yeah. We'll go to Vanessa. I know. We'll pass it over to you now.
Yeah, I think about self-care a lot, especially in my field, because to continue working towards justice and liberation, making sure that you are filling yourself up and having that reserve pot of energy is incredibly important because, as I said, you can get really overwhelmed and feel like you're not making a difference. So to me, self-care relates to that so incredibly, so much. And so ways that I practice self-care and I think about self-care, and I'll put this caveat out here, self-care has been sort of capitalized on. We think about, oh, it's going to get massages, going to get your nails done, like buying all these things. That's self-care, going on a shopping spree. Self-care doesn't have to be that. Self-care, as Jared said, checking in with yourself. What do you need? I make sure that I get a lot of rest because sleeping makes my mental health better. It makes me feel better. So making sure I'm prioritizing my sleep and getting enough of that, you know, checking in. Do I need to drink some water? Maybe I need to eat some fruits and veggies, or maybe it is some candy is going to make me feel better. I think spending time with my loved ones and infusing joy. I will say, trying to figure out how to have fun and joy in the day is a learning curve for me, but trying to figure out what that is. And I saw this post on Instagram this week that was like, why do we avoid the things that brought us joy when we were children? Why do we just think that those aren't important anymore? And so I've been like reflecting on that this week. Like, what are those things that I really loved when I was younger that brought me joy, calmed me down, gave me a moment to just focus on something else than the state of the world. And how can I bring those back into my world, even if they seem very trivial? Who cares? If they bring you joy, just do them, because that's important. And your joy makes the world a better place. So I try to think about those things in terms of self-care. And I love a massage and getting my nails done. To me, that calms me down too. So self-care looks different for everyone, and you'll need different things.
Absolutely great advice. And now, Nick, we'll go ahead and go over to you.
Sure. Vanessa, you hit the nail on the head. I took the opportunity this week and I watched the Harry Potter movie and lived in a little bit of a different world for 2 hours, something that I would have done in my youth, and why not? But I think the biggest thing for me in self-care, and I have at points in my career been atrocious at this, and I'm getting better, is to remember to unplug. It's not healthy to work 24/7. What do we get? 8 holidays a year standard, so 357. That's not healthy. I was always, especially when I was working in operations, and I had people that were working for me 24/7. They were always going. I felt a lot of the times like I always needed to be on and available, and you've got to balance that with your own mental health and the improvement that comes when your work phone is sitting in the kitchen off to the side or is off for a little bit of a period of time. I try hard now to leave that stuff that I'm working from home in this consultant's role. I try hard to leave that stuff in my office, and I typically try to go in once in the evenings and check to make sure that there's nothing that somebody needed, but I try to make sure it's just once. I learned I was always terrible as an engineer at going on vacation, unplugging and stopping working, because when I was running projects and working as an individual contributor, my contributions stopped if I wasn't actively working on them, right? And I got a lot better at vacations, becoming a supervisor, because if I was leading and building my team up well, everything was still going to happen while I was gone. Sure, it may not have been perfect or exactly the way that I wanted to see it planned or done, but I had confidence in my team that it was going to be done well, it was going to be done safely. And if it was those two things, it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not, if it's done well and it's done safely. Stuff was being accomplished while I was not there. And I truly was able to learn how to unplug. And that helped to steamroll for me being more effective in the workplace, because I'm limiting that amount of time to an 8 or a 9 or some normal number of hours in a day. That's the biggest piece for me. And that's a daily self-care routine, is remembering to unplug and be able to disassociate yourself.
Absolutely. Everyone gave such great advice. And I think it's important to highlight that self-care looks different, right, to everyone across the board. So, maybe the way that you practice self-care is unique, and you don't need to compare your self-care practices to anyone else. And so thank you all for sharing and contributing to this conversation today. And I'm going to ask one final question to everyone. And I want to end kind of on a lighthearted note. This has been a serious conversation, an important conversation for all of us today. But I want to know, individually from all of you, what is your favorite thing about your career path or your job or something that you've experienced throughout your time, working? So let's go ahead and start with Vanessa, and then we'll do Nick, and we'll end with Jared this time to kind of mix up the order.
Ooh, this is a great question. I love public health. I'm a huge public health nerd. You want to talk about public health, hit me up. I will talk your ear off all day about public health. I love the connections I get to make in the field. I work with a variety of partners, And it brings me joys. I get tinglies when I'm in public health spaces to hear all the wonderful, wonderful work that we're doing and all the connections we're making with the community members to make sure that their needs are heard in our projects and our programs, working with the state government and how can we make those, the needs of the government and the needs of the people, how can we compromise and do something that makes us both feel good and works to further public health and further the health and well-being of everyone. So just being able to connect with so many people, a wide variety, that brings me a lot of joy. And for me, that is some self-care too, to really honor those relationships and build those relationships across the state.
Such a great point, right? Like, it's all about relationships. You've highlighted we're all in this together, and we can really see how much you love public health. I think you've passionately presented that today. So thank you for that answer. All right, Nick, you are up. We'll hand it over to you.
So there's a lot of experiences, but if I have to pick one, I know what it is. And it is a miserable, cold night in November. And we are in the middle of starting up part of that $300 million expansion that I referenced, that I was one of the engineers for. And my specific job for that was to be responsible for the startup. And everything is a Thursday night. Everything had gone wrong. We were freezing stuff inside of the pipes. The stuff was shutting down on us. Nothing was going the way we wanted it to. And I will never forget, by a set of pumps that was giving us fits. We had probably 25 of us. We've got our operations and maintenance crew working on 7/12 shift. We've got some of them on nights and rotating in and out. So we've got probably 25 of us. It's probably 8 or 9 at night. It's about 10 degrees outside. And we all get up in a circle and have a good old-fashioned elementary school little league pep talk. And at the end, all of these adults of tons of various backgrounds, I think we ranged in age from 19 to 60, get in and put their hands in the middle of a circle, and everybody goes, all right, 1, 2, 3, we can do this. And that, for me, that experience in a room full of adults still is so inspiring, that a bunch of people could set aside a week's worth of frustrations and individual difficulties and refocus their efforts on achieving something for the team. And we ultimately got it. The next day in that effort, we did finally start up successfully. So that moment for me will always stick out.
That's really awesome. And outside of any frustrations you can have, things just aren't going right. It really does prove, if you work together as a collective, whether that's, individuals outside of work or with inside work, we can really get things done together. And I think that also spotlights some of the changes that we're trying to make. We've talked about policy changes. We've talked about changing people's mind. And, if you put some of those stigmas aside and you work together and go team, you can absolutely get things done. So thank you so much for sharing that experience.
Yeah.
All right, Jared, you're up.
I've had some time to think, and my answer is not any one single story. Nick, that's a great story, though. I'm going to use that someday when things aren't going well. So working sort of in government, working as an arts administrator, working in grant making, I am somewhat removed from all of the work that's sort of happening on the ground. I mean, I work in an office tower in a downtown area, far away from the activities that I read about and that my agency supports. And there's if anyone's worked with state government grants, Vanessa, I'm sure you know this, there's some pretty stringent reporting measures that have to happen. But what is a pain in the butt for our grantees to do, this final report, I get such joy from seeing and reading and watching the impact that my work directly has on communities around the state. It is very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day labors of work and just going on to this next task. But taking a step back and remembering and thinking about all of the lives that you are impacting, beyond that one email that you're sending or that one phone call you have to make, has been really joyful and kind of keeps me grounded in a world that sort of necessitates attention going everywhere at any given moment. So taking a step back, remembering your purpose and things that have made you smile before have been really great and beneficial, and that I really just hold dearly every day. Because like I said, it's easy to sort of forget about the impact that you're sometimes making, no matter what field you're working in, public health or engineering or oil and gas or whatever it is. You know, it's good to keep in mind the lives that you're helping. And so if you can sort of conjure that into this day-to-day sort of mantra, I think that's a great way to sort of just keep things light and positive. So good question. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. And I want to spotlight that word impact, right? All of us have an impact, whether we're an engineer, whether we're a public health professional, whether we're in the arts. Being our true authentic selves will only help us not only impact others, but improve this world. And that's really what we're trying to do, you know, as an organization at Detroit Chempreneurists, but all of us individually, you know, out there sharing our stories and working towards a common goal of improving everyone's life and making it so everyone feels comfortable to be their authentic selves. And so that's wonderful, wonderful advice from all of you. And we really appreciate you sharing your stories. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can engage with Detroit Chempreneurists, help Detroit Chempreneurists, and all these different things that we are doing in our recent efforts. So we are actively looking for participating classrooms, schools, organizations to host our workshops. Brittany mentioned some of the great things that we have going on, but we are looking to reach more people. So if you know anyone who may be interested in working with us, we offer a dynamic programming to cater to your STEAM needs. And if you're interested in signing up, you can always reach out to Lynn, who is our Director of Outreach, as Brittany mentioned his email earlier, or you can send an email to info@detroitchempreneurists.org. Other ways that you can help is we are actively doing research. You know, we have surveys we'll be sending out after this event to all of the participants, but we also have surveys available for community members, for students, for parents. You know, help us improve our organization, help us develop it to be what is most beneficial for everyone and not just what we think, you know, people need to hear. It's important to hear from community members, just like yourselves here listening in today or speaking with us and presenting today. Please connect us to other organizations. If you think we'd be a good fit to partner, to just have conversations, you know, to make our resources available to other organizations, please spread the word, put us out there and tell people about us. We also, we're funding our efforts. You know, we're a small organization. We do a lot of grassroots fundraisers, but we have a lot of ways out there that you can donate to Detroit Chempreneurists. You can add us as your Amazon Smile charity. You could create a Facebook fundraiser if you really enjoyed today's event. You can donate directly through donorbox.org, and all of these links are on our link tree. And, you know, just spread the word. Talk about the great time that you had today. Tell your friends about us. Tell your family about us. And just encourage people, you know, to be involved and to really pursue their passions and check out our organization. And so there are many other ways that you can help and support us, but these are just a few. And we really appreciate everyone taking the time to just be here and be a part of this, because that means so much to us and our support efforts. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Brittany so she can share a few resources related to what we've spoken about today.
Thanks, Cass. So every month we try to highlight some resources relevant to that month's topic. So for our presenters today, if you know any additional resources that we can provide, that we could add to the presentation or just provide on our website or through our social media, we'd love to share that. I'm going to talk briefly a little bit about each organization that I'm sharing today. The first is LGBTQ+ advocacy and STEM, so ASEE.org. So despite recent advances in equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, or LGBTQ+ individuals in the US, students and faculty on college campuses still experience harassment, exclusionary behavior, and discrimination. Initiatives such as Safe Zone Campus, ally training are affecting a gradual positive change in climate for LGBTQ+ individuals. But progress in STEM departments has been slower than in other disciplines. And I think that was touched on earlier in the presentation too. So this transformative project links diversity research with a faculty development initiative to promote LGBTQ plus equality in STEM. So some of their programming includes Safe Zone Ally training workshops that are interactive training sessions that seek to raise awareness for LGBTQ plus inclusion in STEM and create a visible network of allies to foster a supportive atmosphere for LGBTQ plus individuals. So the workshops are intended for a STEM audience and were developed by STEM faculty with input from STEM students and scholars of engineering culture. And their workshops emphasize issues and behaviors that are likely observed and experienced in the STEM environment. So their workshops explore resources and best practices that work particularly well in STEM classrooms and environments. Our next resource is 𝗣𝗲𝗲𝗶𝘀𝘁𝘀. So the 𝗣𝗲𝗲𝗃 project addresses the underrepresentation of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people in science and space. So sponsored by the International Institute of Astronautical Sciences, they highlight the contributions of LGBTQ plus members currently working in science and space and provide grants to promising LGBTQ plus students currently pursuing professions in space-related fields. They believe that the communities are empowered when they are represented, and astronauts inspire our youth, represent limitless possibilities, and serve as ambassadors to STEM. And so their goal is to train and fly a member of the LGBTQ community as scientist astronaut, and this person would be an inspiration to the LGBT community while enabling cutting edge research. A next organization is Out to Innovate, NOGLSTP, and their mission is to empower LGBTQ plus individuals in STEM by providing education, advocacy, professional development, networking, and peer support. And so they educate all communities regarding scientific, technological, and medical concerns of LGBTQ plus people. So their mission is executed through continuously growing programs. So those programs empower LGBTQ plus individuals in those STEAM fields by providing education, advocacy, professional development, networking, and peer support. The next organization is OSTEM, so Out in Science, is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it's a professional association for LGBTQ plus people in the STEM community. And with over 100 student chapters at colleges and universities and professional chapters in cities across the US and abroad, OSTEM is the largest chapter-based organization focused on LGBTQ plus in STEM. So their vision is to envision a world where LGBTQ plus people in the STEM community are empowered to achieve success in a safe and supportive environment that celebrates diversity and unique contributions like we talked about today. And their mission is to empower LGBTQ plus people in STEM to succeed personally, academically, professionally by cultivating environments and communities that nurture innovation, leadership, and advocacy. And some of their programming includes annual and regional conferences. They have a professional development summit, a scholarship program, graduate app assistance, mentorship programs, and award programs. And then the last organization we're going to share today is called Start Out. So Start Out accelerates the growth of LGBTQ plus community to drive its economic empowerment, building a world where LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs have equal access to lead, succeed, and shape the workforce of the future. So they have community programming, Founders Resources Program, a startup growth lab, and scholarship programs. And there's also opportunities for LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs to connect with mentors and investors. So those were some of our resources around today's topic. Next, I want to touch on this presentation we have recorded today. So again, if you know someone that would benefit from this conversation, I'm glad that it's out to the world so more people can hear this. So in the future, you can subscribe for future videos. Every month we post our conversations around our different topics and other content on there. And also be sure to not only subscribe, but like videos that you enjoy as well. So I'm gonna pass it on to Cass.
All right, thanks so much, Brittany. So I want to round this out with some recent exciting news. You can now get Detroit Chempreneurist merch through Closed Talk. I do have the website on the bottom of the slide. You can go to closedtalk.com, search Detroit Chempreneurist, learn more about our mission and vision. But we also have 17 different options to choose from as far as merch goes: shirts, sweats, tanks, yoga pants, hats, and more. So if you're interested in supporting us or wearing our logo, please feel free to check out closedtalk.com. They work with some amazing organizations, and they're really doing great work by supporting organizations through a merch program. And so finally, Brittany and I don't want to speak for you, but we both want to thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation and listening to what our guest presenters had to say. And we really hope that this has made an impact, or maybe really just provoked some type of thought in your mind. And so with that being said, we're going to head and close out this presentation. And again, we just really appreciate all of your support and just sharing and being here with us today. So I want to thank everyone and have everyone enjoy the rest of their second Saturday of this month. And we'll see you back here in July, same space and place, for our presentation on financial resources for entrepreneurs.